Today in episode 41 of the podcast, we will be discussing Amazon giving us an update on Rings of Power. Is it going to continue on? What are their plans moving forward? And Todd Phillips breaks his silence on Joker Folie. We'll also be reviewing the film Saturday Night and discussing our favorite Halloween watches. So whether it's horror movie or family-friendly stuff, we're going to break down what we like to watch during the season. But I'm Brad, he's Josh, and welcome to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
Before we get started with the news this week, there are just a couple days left to get 15% off our merch in our merch store. So go to willbringthepopcorn.com/merch. Check out all the new stuff that we have available for sale out there. Really appreciate everyone's support. And don't forget also, we are still in the middle of our giveaway for October. You have until October 25th. Go to willbringthepopcorn.com/giveaway where you can get one of our new t-shirts in a size of your choice, as well as a 4K copy of Godzilla -1.
And if you go to their socials for our post about our giveaway and another post, we have an additional option for you to be able to share those and get an extra entry into it. So make sure you get your entries in. The movie's great. The box set looks beautiful and stuff. So you're really going to want to get in on this contest.
Absolutely. So for our first news story of the week, we've got some news from DC regarding the Lantern series. We just talked about that they announced that Kyle Chandler was playing Hal Jordan. Well, we finally got Jon Stewart. I know there was some talk about if Jon Stewart was going to be involved. It's official. We do have somebody cast to play the role of Jon Stewart, and it's going to be Aaron Pierre. Now, Aaron Pierre has, kind of really come onto the scene this year, especially with Rebel Ridge on Netflix. It was wildly successful for Netflix. He's also going to be doing the voice of Mufasa in the Disney Lion King live-action CG, version of the Lion King that's coming out at the end of the year. So he's really taking off this year, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the Lantern show.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what he does. Of course, finally getting this character in live action. We had hinted with the Arrowverse that John Diggle was going to become one of the Lanterns. That never really happened in the series, but we add both of these to Nathan Fillion. So he was kind of the first Lantern to come into the new DCU. He's in the Superman movie as Guy Gardner, and it's going to be interesting to see how those three play off. So we've got kind of our big three. Now we're going to see how they fill out the rest of the cast, because it's supposed to be the Lantern Corps. So we're going to be seeing a lot of Lanterns and seeing who else kind of fills out those extra roles and what they do with it, because we still think with Kyle Chandler being older and everything coming into Hal Jordan, all the actors they were looking at for Hal Jordan were older, that he might have a more minor role. It's a more aged, maybe he's just kind of and the council or something like that, where he's just kind of giving advice, but he's not one out there doing a lot of stuff, because it does kind of point and look like Jon Stewart is going to be our main guy that we're following along with it, with Hal Jordan and Guy Gardner being, more support.
Yeah, but it's exciting that we have all of our Earthbound Lanterns at this point. So now we can kind of see them probably start on Earth and expand out in the universe and, interact with more of the Lantern Corps that, a lot of fans of the Lantern, characters are really clamoring for them to dive a little bit deeper into. So now it feels like we've got our foundation for the show, and I'm excited to see it kick off. I know James Gunn recently just announced that the Supergirl project and this project are the only two in pre-production right now that are live action. So it's exciting to see, that finally starting to come together and hopefully get ready to start shooting probably by the end of this year, beginning of next year.
He also talked about another animated movie that would be about the Robin. So you've got Dick Grayson and you've got Todd and all that. So they're getting another animated movie going, which, that's kind of where DC has excelled in the last probably 10, 15 years, is that their animated films have been really killing it and doing extremely well, and they've been cranking out a bunch of them. But this is, I think, past Creature Commandos, the second kind of announced animated feature for them.
Yeah, it's a lot of exciting things in the works at DC, and hopefully with James Gunn at the helm, it can kind of reignite that, excitement from the fan base for this, that they've got a lot of work to do to kind of get people back in the fold for them. I know several of their recent projects have not been successful, kind of flopped. Hopefully with James Gunn, riding the ship, that, we start to see some better stories, some higher quality storytelling moving forward, and kind of bringing back DC up to the level that a lot of people are hoping that it could, potentially get back to. And this Lantern series is an exciting step in that direction. I'm ready to see what they do with it for sure.
I still want to see a Ryan Reynolds joke or a cameo, or even though if it's like his face on a magazine or Hal shows up and what are you expecting, Ryan Reynolds?
Right.
To make an old joke or something like, what are you expecting, Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah.
Something like that.
They gotta play meta off of it for sure. But yeah, it's exciting times for DC, and hopefully, now that we've got our core Lanterns cast and it's in pre-production now, so ready to see them get the ball rolling and see what they give us for sure.
Jumping over to Amazon, they gave us a update on a couple shows. So we'll start off with Reacher, which is one I still haven't got around to watching, but I've heard great things about it. Season 3 is set to debut in 2025, but they've already renewed it for Season 4 because this was kind of up in the air because they're closing the Paramount Studios and moving everything to CBS and moving things around. We weren't sure how some of these shows were going to last or exist after all these changes, but Reacher has been one of the most popular ones, and it's good to see that they're already committing to another season before anybody hasn't even seen Season 3.
Yeah, Reacher is a great show if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Alan Ritchson is fantastic as Reacher in this show.
He's a monster.
He's just a ginormous man, but he is really good in all of these episodes that they've put out so far, and I'm excited to see that not only are they confident in giving it a Season 3, but a Season 4 as well, because there's a lot of stories, if you know about, the books and everything about Jack Reacher, that there's a lot of material for them to chew through, and they've only scratched the surface on a couple of those stories at this point, and I'm excited to see that kind of get the nudge forward from Amazon. It's a big deal for them, and just, keeping Alan Ritchson around is always a good thing. I love that guy and everything he's in.
Yeah, I'm planning to get around to watching the first 2 seasons, so I'm prepared for when Season 3 drops in 2025, so I can be all caught up with it, because I've wanted to watch it. It's just so much stuff and busy life and everything else, just haven't had time to check it out. But Amazon also gave us an update on Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, so if you want to look back through our last few episodes, we did a full breakdown of Season 2, and we kind of left it wondering, Amazon has talked about that they want to do 5 seasons, but there has been either viewership numbers being lower than they expected or just fan backlash is still happening against it. Were they going to continue forward with Season 3 or Season 4 or Season 5? Well, they came out and said, oh, yeah, we're full steam ahead. We're not stopping. Rings of Power is continuing. It's going on. They've had over 100 million views on this series so far and basically said we have no plan to stop it.
Yeah, and you can go back in our archives. We just did our recent watch-along of Season 2. Now that it's over, all the episodes are available on Amazon for you to watch. It's really exciting to see that they're giving it, another chance for at least one more season that we're aware of now. I know they have plans for 5, but the fact that they are confident in at least moving forward with Season 3, we really feel that by the end of Season 2, they really got the ball rolling on this show in a positive direction. A lot more cohesive storytelling. It's not a perfect series by any means, but I really feel like they righted the ship, and I'm excited that they're, kind of putting their foot down and deciding, hey, we're going to continue forward with it anyway, because that is easily the most expensive TV show ever made, and the fact that they're so heavily invested in it and still willing to continue to invest in it, I'm very happy about as a big fan of Lord of the Rings. I'm excited to see what they do moving forward with it.
Yeah, like you said, Season 2 got a lot better than Season 1 did. It still has some plot holes and it has some changes that it's doing because it's not following 100%, but I really enjoyed kind of what it's done. I'm able to look past some of the glaring issues. I know there's a lot of people who can't do that, but I'm looking forward to see what they do with Season 3 because they left it in a spot that really starts building us to where The Hobbit and where The Lord of the Rings and everything started, and getting us into the stories that we know more. And of course, we're getting different characters that we haven't seen in live action. And so I enjoyed Season 2, so I am excited to see that we're at least getting Season 3. I still don't know how they're going to do 5 seasons out of it. It feels like where they left Season 2 and what we may have in Season 3, that probably maybe 4 seasons makes more sense than 5 seasons, because I'm trying to see just where exactly it has to go, because Season 3 is probably going to get Sauron making the One Ring and giving the rings to men and starting the war. So, Season 4 would more likely be the gigantic war against him and some more depth like that, but can you spread that out into 2 seasons?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how they try to stretch that out, even if they do. They've done a good job of keeping everything to the point on focused in Season 2, and it's only 8 episodes a season. It's a lot more compact storytelling. They could probably branch out and go longer if they wanted to, but I kind of like the flow of the show right now, and I feel like they've really hit their sweet spot. So maybe 8 episodes is where it's at, and to keep going. But yeah, I want to see how they flesh this out, because you're knowing where they're winding up eventually, where, you know, if you've watched Lord of the Rings, you know where Sauron winds up and who is responsible for taking him out and who's involved in those fights. And we'll see, you know, how they incorporate that into this show at some point. And you do got to I kind of agree with you on the sense that 4 is probably the sweet spot for it, and maybe 5 would be a bit too much dragging it out based on the pace that they're moving at now. So 4 would probably make more sense, but I'm definitely excited that they're continuing to move forward with it, like I said, and we'll see what happens, man. They're you know, in the right spot for it. It does take a long time for these shows to shoot. You got to take that into effect too, because it's been two years in between seasons, so we're probably not going to get season 3 until 2026 at the earliest. And it's you got to figure that time frame into the end. If they go season 5 at the pace they're at, it's 2030 by the time they end the show. That's a long time for a show to be around. So we'll see what they wind up doing.
Here's what we got. House of the Dragon, I think, is ending with 4 itself. Yeah. So, you know, maybe 4 is the magic number for these, because even we know with Game of Thrones and we're in it at the end, maybe 4 is the right number to end these fantasy shows on.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see how they deal with that moving forward for sure. But I want to kind of pivot now to a game series that, you know, I grew up loving, especially the Shinobi games on Sega Genesis were some of my favorite on there. Really difficult games, but we're finally getting a Shinobi movie, which I feel is very interesting. So if you don't know about the backstory of Shinobi, it's like a ninja, you know, action adventure game. And I'm excited to see that, you know, they're getting a movie. It looks like it's going to be directed by Sam Hargrave, who directed the Extraction movie. Really excited to see what company is taking on this project.
I didn't see who was putting it out, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with it there. But it's a series that, when you think about it, it would make a perfect movie, because it's going to give you a lot of action. It's just where the story is. Like it was more about hack and slash and beating people up than a fully deep story. But stuff like that and Ninja Gaiden and all that could do really good as a movie, because they have some really good costume designs and a lot of good action and stuff in it. And they've got a big action director to do it. So I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what they can do with it if they get the costume right and the look right and give it a good visual appeal with some probably over the top, I don't even know if graphic violence probably in it, that it could be done really well. And we've seen that rated R movies, action movies, have done good. We don't know if they're aiming for a PG-13 or R, but it's a series that maybe they could go R and go a little harder with the violence and action.
Absolutely. So when I heard that this was coming through, it immediately took me back to my childhood and playing these games like with my dad. One of the favorite games we had were like Mortal Kombat and the Shinobi games were a ton of fun to play. And I just remember countless hours of him and I trying to, you know, beat some of these levels that those are really hard games. I know I want to say either Shinobi 2 or Shinobi 3 were like notoriously incredibly difficult games to complete, and I just remember getting so frustrated playing those games, and it felt like a big deal, like a big sense of accomplishment when we finally beat it. But it's cool to see it kind of get the movie treatment now, because there's a lot of fun, like you said. It's a lot more, you know, side scroll hack and slash kind of get through the game type stuff, and we'll see what kind of backlore they fill in for this movie. But I'm excited for that one. That's got a potential to be a lot of fun. You give me a good violent, you know, ninja film, I'm all for it. I hope that it does go the rated R route though, because I think to really capture what I think would be the best story, I think you got to lean into the violent aspect of it a little bit.
You can go a little darker, a little more violence, play on the emotion of the story and stuff. It could be a lot of fun. We'll see exactly what they're doing with it and when it comes out, because we didn't even get like a release date when they're working on it. But it's interesting to see more and more games are being made. Like we got the Tomb Raider anime series has started and is out there to watch, and then we just had we've had Super Mario Brothers, and we've had a lot of games like Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is about to come out. We had the Knuckles TV series this year, stuff. So like video game movies, when they were before, when you saw them coming out, it's like, oh, okay, this is a Uwe Boll, or this is something else that is just not going to be good. But we're actually getting some quality video game movies and everything coming out, and we've still got rumors of God of War and Gears of War and all those getting either films or series. So there's an interesting time ahead for video game adaptations.
Absolutely, and it's inspiring that confidence that we're getting those stories, because now these films are being made by people that grew up playing the game. So I think having that influx of people that grew up playing the games, because before, when these games were adapted, there was kind of a generational gap there with the people trying to turn these into films that maybe didn't necessarily grow up with the nostalgia factor for these games.
You didn't like the original Super Mario Brothers movie?
No, not at all. That was absolutely terrible. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And I also want to find the guy that made Dragon Ball, but that's neither here nor there. So, yeah, it's exciting to see what they come up with for that, and we'll get more information on that, and talk about it as casting gets put together for it and filming starts on it. But that's one that's definitely fun one to keep an eye on.
So we reviewed Joker Folie on our last episode. You can go back in our archives and see exactly what we thought about that. But Todd Phillips has been a bit silent since the movie came out, and he finally broke his silence and told us kind of what we all expected after watching the second film, that he never saw Arthur as the Joker. He was just this guy that had something projected on him. Society, the people, everyone was telling him he's this and he's trying to be it. And, he's not wanting to be an icon and not wanting to do this and stuff. But, and I get that, but it also feels like a cop-out in a way too, that you called the movie Joker. You've called it Joker. And maybe you're trying to explore that this is more of, all right, he started the Joker, but he's not the Joker. Like, people started making him the Joker, but it doesn't help really, I think, the story of Folie, where it kind of fell short and everything else, to have this revelation, because it's like we get what Arthur went through and he finally breaks free and finds that I'm just me and I'm not that. And I'd like that revelation and stuff, but it was also just, it didn't work in the movie, and this just kind of didn't really seem to help much of anything.
Yeah, this 100% in my mind feels like a cop-out, and it gets frustrating for, me as a viewer of movies and somebody who loves it, when, a movie doesn't do as well, and then the director kind of, like, in a way it feels like they're talking down to us, like maybe we didn't understand the movie, or we didn't get it's your job as a director and somebody making this movie to get your point across better, and it feels a little insulting to our intelligence, where he was like, oh, he's never really been the Joker. I'll throw BS on that, because, like, if you had this artistic vision for the story that you were trying to tell, you didn't get the point across in this movie. Like you said, you literally call it Joker. I get why you call it that, but at the same time, you deal with him. The second movie is entirely about Arthur and his, like, which version of this is my best version of myself, which version is truest to myself. And it's not society projecting this onto him. This is a moniker that he creates for himself, and people latch on to it and they attach themselves to it. So don't sit there and tell me that he was never really the Joker to begin with, when this was all made by him. This was all Arthur's.
He put on the makeup. He put on the suit. He colored his hair.
Yeah.
He did, he changed, like, physically, how he held himself and how he talked, and mannerisms, everything he did changed when he was the Joker.
Yeah, it's that split personality and that duality of self that he really embraced in that first movie, and he really struggled to reconcile with in the second movie. Don't sit there and tell me that he wasn't the Joker to begin with. He may not be the version of the Joker that most people recognize and understand, and he kind of threw that to, the end of the movie. But I don't agree with the whole coming out of it saying that, he just had this thing that was put upon him. No, he did some truly heinous things to lash back out at people that he felt had wronged him and, were representative of his feelings towards the world. I understand that. That concept's not lost to me, but don't sit there and say that, he was never really intended to be the Joker, because that's just not true. I think it's a little bit of him trying to save face, and I hate just kind of dunking on somebody like that, because it's not really anything I really cared to do. But when you try to insult your audience's intelligence by saying things like that, it really kind of strikes a nerve with me that it just left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, because even though, people in the clown group that he was in and other people were treating him badly, the Joker persona didn't begin until he did it, until he put on the makeup and the suit and everything else. Like, he created it. So it wasn't society creating and forcing it on him. he revealed that to everybody else, and then they got onto it and everything else. And it's also adds some confusion because, there's now more information come out on like behind the scenes stuff. So apparently in the first Joker film, Arthur was supposed to cut himself and give him scars on his cheeks, kind of like Heath Ledger's Joker. But Christopher Nolan, who was, having a lot of control with WB at that time, vetoed it and said only Heath Ledger's Joker should have that. And so, well, if he's doing something like that, is that still saying that he's not, or is that a mental health issue? But someone also got the script and looked at the very last line of the script, and it said, he is now the Joker. And so there's a lot of confusion. Like if you look at the actual script, look at the original ending and stuff, all of it points to him being the Joker. And then I get with the second movie, if you were trying to separate that now, like already has split personalities, it wasn't really. But in the end, you say Arthur said it was all him. But then which is the real Arthur? Is the real Arthur the one who's always sunken in solace? Or is it the crazed lunatic? Is that really Arthur? Because you kind of just left it open to where both of them are Arthur, none of them are Arthur. It just left confusion. And it's like they're all just trying to, I think, save face now, because they're even kind of throwing Joaquin under the bus, because they said the story for this came from a dream of his, and that he and Todd Phillips butted heads a lot on the story and the movie and stuff, and that Todd basically made it for Joaquin, that this was something he came up with and he made it for him.
Yeah, it's just there's just a lot of this that's just leaving a really sour taste in my mouth for an original movie that I really enjoyed and loved. The original, we've raved about it in our last episode, talking about how much we love the original, and how this one just really fell flat, and it does for me personally. And it's just really, it's really sad to see, the outcome of this. Like, would he be saying any of this had this also been commercially successful? I don't think it would have been, but when you see a film struggle like that, they're under a lot of pressure from the studio to make money off of the movie, which doesn't really look like they're going to at this point, that, you start to see some of the dirty laundry being aired out. And it's just, it's just really rough to see. And for somebody like Todd Phillips, who as a director, I really respect a lot for a lot of the stuff that he has put out, for this one, it just feels very petty. I know he was, just really hands off with Warner Brothers for this one, and kind of just went and did his own thing with it, and kind of
he wouldn't talk to DC.
Yeah, it had no DC input or anything on it, which is fine if that's the film you want to make. But you kind of gotta, if you're gonna stand on your soapbox like that, you have to stand behind what you put out at that point. And it really feels like he's just deflecting and making excuses left and right. Which, I'm sorry, I don't like I said, I don't like dunking on people like this, but he's bringing a lot of it on himself, and it's really unfortunate because, at the end of the day, the story fell flat. It wasn't good, in my opinion. And, now he's, dealing with that backlash, maybe for the first time in his career. I don't remember if any of his previous movies were critically panned, that he's kind of lashed out like this. But it's a really unfortunate thing to see.
Yeah, with Joker Folie, it just felt like, I still feel like, was it a necessary movie? Because what did it actually give us other than Arthur's reveal of how he truly felt about himself? But did we need 2.5 hours of that? Because like I said, Joker 1 was a near masterpiece, and I've seen some people who go against those that didn't like it, saying, speaking, you didn't like it because it was a comic book movie. I love the first Joker, and it wasn't a comic book movie at all. Like it is about mental health and a deranged guy, and a guy who struggled with bullying and being treated wrong and badly, and projecting and trying to find a life. And it had depth, and it had heart, and it had just really tough moments to watch and everything else. Like everything fit and worked and went well, and that kind of character building and depth and story just wasn't there in the second one.
Yeah, it was really lacking, and I'm kind of over this movie. I know it's going to have a very short stay in the theater at this point because it's just not doing financially well, and it's unfortunate to see such a talented director really lash out and kind of deflect a lot of the blame for, how this movie's been received by people. And it really sucks to see that from, as somebody who is a fan of his work, to kind of see that. It kind of makes me have a little bit more caution with supporting some of his future projects. I hate saying that, but it really leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I'm kind of just ready to pivot on to our next story, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
So one of the movies we're really looking forward to seeing coming up in, a month or so is Gladiator 2. So Gladiator's one of our, favorite movies. The Gladiator 2 looks like it's going to be fantastic. And we got a little bit of interesting news from Ridley Scott, who mentioned that they're already starting a script for a third Gladiator movie, which is very interesting.
Yeah, when I first saw the first one with Russell Crowe and stuff, and it was an excellent movie, Oscar award-winning movie and stuff, but you never really thought it would get a sequel. How it ended, where it ended, was like, all right, this is the story. Maybe if they were going to do something, be spinoffs or something else, but they didn't touch it for, almost 20 years or so, and then we get the sequel, and before the sequel's even out, he's like, I think 8 pages into a script and said he's got a good outline of what he wants to do. I never expected this to end up being a trilogy.
Yeah, because, there was some confusion as to whether or not, the second movie was going to get made, and now that it's made, you kind of have a little bit of a background of what you're going to expect, who the main character is in the second film. And from the sounds of it, it sounds like this may be an arc that they're about to tell over the course of a couple films now, and it's going to be interesting to see where they leave, Gladiator 2 to, potentially be a Gladiator 3. Is this a case where, it follows a similar pattern where you have this character who has this big heroic arc, and maybe they meet their end in the film, and you go on and tell the story of another character, coming up through, through those set of circumstances to kind of go after, the leaders of this empire, and wondering if that's the way they're going to do it, or if this is going to be something that's going to be told out over the course of a couple movies, which at the end of the day, I don't really know how to feel about that, because like I said, the first movie is so perfect in the story that it tells, and its seeming finality to it, that they kind of picked up the ball with this new character who, looked up to Maximus and everything like that. And is this something they're going to tell over a couple movies? I don't know how to feel about that, because they do tell such a good story compacted into one movie that is this really warranted to build a franchise out of? But we always go back to everything feels like it's getting a franchise now. So if you can make money off of it, you're going to kind of stretch out a story and kind of milk it for what it's worth, which at the end of the day, if we're getting good stories, I'm okay with it. But is this one that's necessarily needing a third movie now that we're getting a second one? Time will tell with how the second one plays out.
Yeah, until we see the second one, I'll give Ridley Scott the benefit of the doubt, just because he's had some misses, but he's had more major hits than misses and stuff. So if he feels they're strong enough to be 3, but yeah, it's just, again, we don't know exactly what happens in 2 to know what to expect, to think if we have 3. Did he go in thinking he had a third movie in mind? So instead of having a solid ending like the original Gladiator has, is Gladiator 2 going to have a more open-ended ending so he could do the trilogy? But yeah, will it continue on with our same new guy and lead and everything, or is it going to pick up with someone new many years down the line? Because the second one definitely looks like he's went bigger and bolder. Like, you've got the Colosseum filled up with water, and you have ships and sharks, which apparently really happened, but it's also, if you didn't know about it, it's like, all right, wait, why do we have a Colosseum filled with water and we have sharks and all these big battles? But I just hope they hide all the nitrogen canisters and everything else in the chariot, so we don't see that bubble. Because I love the film, but I cannot, whenever it gets to that scene, I am looking for it, I'm staring at it, and I'm like, all right, there's the big canisters that makes the chariot flip over. Like, yep, it's still there.
Still there. I love that, though, because it's one of those fun things that you know about to go looking for it, and it's so distracting when you get to that point. But yeah, we'll see, man. I don't know. Like you said, I agree with Ridley Scott having more hits than misses, but at the same time, until we see Gladiator 2, we don't know. I'll have a better idea on how I feel about a third one after I see the second one, but I'm still very excited to see the second one. Looks fantastic. The cast is amazing. You got Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal. Like, it's a stacked cast, and hopefully the story delivers on, the incredible cast that they've assembled for it.
I do, from the trailers alone, get with some people who are talking about, why is Denzel talking like an American in this time and stuff. So we'll see if there's any answer to that, because I mean, I love Denzel and stuff, but it's like, he very, very much sticks out because everyone else is talking with accents and he's doing his regular voice and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out and see how people feel about it, because you can go back to our favorite films episode. We talked about Gladiator, and the original was fantastic. Like, I never expected to have 2 of them, nonetheless 3 of them, but we'll see once we get a look at Gladiator 2 next month to see if we feel then if Gladiator 3 needs to happen.
It's going to be such a fun show that I'm looking forward to recording, because we get Gladiator 2 and Wicked in the same week. I'm excited for that episode. So, little spoiler alert for those of you keeping up, that when that time comes around, we're going to be doing a full review on both films in the same week. That's an episode I'm very much
I'm still surprised that Wicked being almost 3 hours, and it's only part one because it's been somewhat weird that they haven't advertised it, but I don't think Dune really advertised that was part one until they announced part two, because Wicked is going to be 2 films, and the first film is almost 3 hours. Yep. So, I mean, though, I think the play is about 3 hours.
In total, so they're really stretching it out for this. But, yeah, I'm still excited for it. You're not going to dim my shine for that one.
No,
I've been waiting on Wicked for a while, and that looks incredible, so I'm excited for that.
That's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to talk about 2 vastly different films on that episode.
Yeah, excited for that one for sure, just for the dynamics of the two, thriller, action, epic saga versus the big musical epic that's going to be, 2 different opposing forces in the same weekend. Hopefully it's like a Barbenheimer situation, because I know they're calling it Glicked, and we've kind of poked fun at that. But yeah, hopefully it has the same kind of cultural impact that did, and both movies do extremely well.
As long as Gladiator 2 isn't the musical epic.
Well, it's not directed by Todd Phillips, so we have nothing to worry about.
You just throw dancing and song numbers into Gladiator 2.
Just keep on the lookout for Lady Gaga.
Hugh Jackman pops up and singing a song in the Coliseum.
You know what? That would be awesome. I would love that, actually. Could we do that for Gladiator 3?
Just make it Gladiator the musical.
I would love it. Let's go. Lock shields and let's sing some songs.
Well, heading over to Lord of the Rings again. So, we have Andy Serkis working on The Hunt for Gollum, and a lot of the talk has been going back and forth through previous actors on what they would think about coming back. They've talked to Viggo. He's given an answer about what he thought about if he would return as Aragorn, and Ian McKellen and a few others. But they talked to Hugo Weaving, who basically flat shut down everything. It's like, yeah, I'm done with Middle Earth. Like, he's just like, I'm getting older. Elrond's immortal and stuff. I'm older. I've had my fill of Middle Earth. But he's like excited for them to do stuff, but he's just done. And he had a similar approach. Even though he played Red Skull only one time, he did not want to return for Infinity War. And that's where he got Ross Marquand stepped in and did a brilliant job of imitating him, which I didn't even know until the movie was over that that wasn't Hugo. But he had the same kind of feelings that, he was kind of done with Marvel. He didn't want to do it, and he didn't do it. Like, he's a guy, like, if I don't have interest in it anymore, I am not signing up for it. So the money doesn't really matter to him. If he's done, he's done.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but I respect it. I respect them taking that hard stance, because a lot of people have no problem, signing their name on that check when it comes through. But good for him, man. Like he says, it's just not something I have any interest in doing. He's working on things that he's passionate about. Good for him. I mean, it's disappointing. You want to see all of the classic characters show up, especially if you're getting some, and you got to find ways to work it to where it makes sense. But I'm excited to see that film for obvious reasons. We have no problem not hiding the fact that we're big Lord of the Rings fans, and excited for this movie. While we were a little concerned about it at first, feels like it's getting a little bit of proper care and taken care of. With Andy Serkis at the helm of it, who was just incredible as Gollum to begin with, and respect to him for just saying, hey, I have no interest in doing it. Like, good for you, man. Like, stand your ground, do your thing. And I really have a lot of, respect for people that, are true to, like, okay, I've done this character. It's gone the way I wanted it to. I'm happy with what we put out. I did that for 3 films in this case, where he played Elrond for 3 movies. And he's like, at that point, I'm just kind of ready to leave that as it is. If you want to go back to it, cast somebody else. I mean, good for you.
Yeah, and kind of we talked about it with our season 2 finale review of Rings of Power, that we were wondering when it comes to that final battle scene when Sauron's defeated, are they going to try to get some of the original actors back to kind of, because we don't know if it's going to try to match up to the movies or if they're going to do their own thing and make it like this is not connected to Peter Jackson's adaptation at all, because we don't really know. Like, the door looks exactly the same because we got the door to the mine and everything, and a lot of stuff kind of looks exactly the same, but we don't really know if they do plan on having it fully connected, because if so, you've got Hugo Weaving at the battle with Sauron, who's talking to the king and everything. Like, he's a big part of that. So it sounds like if they do, he's not going to be a part of that. Are they going to still use the same Elrond actor and try to age him up, or what are they going to kind of do with that? I would assume they would stick with the same Elrond actor, sure. But it kind of kiboshes 2 items. He's not going to return for Hunt for Gollum, and he more than likely would not return for Rings of Power either.
Yeah, I think if he were going to return for one or the other, he would probably do the movie and not the show.
Yeah, it's got Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis behind it.
And I get that as well. So that kind of puts the kibosh on any theory that we would have as far as that goes, which, hey, now that we know, let's move forward and see what kind of stories we get out of this. And like I said, when that movie comes out, I'm going to be the first one there in the theater to see it when it comes out. I'm excited for it. And, good for Hugo for saying thanks, but no thanks. I respect it, and, more power to him. So one of the shows that's gotten a few spinoffs already is The Big Bang Theory, and we just got announcements for another spinoff series, but it's definitely coming from a place we weren't expecting. So we've had, Young Sheldon, which was absolutely, had an incredible run on CBS, just recently wrapped up as well. Now you've got the George and Mindy series that's getting ready to start. Well, we got news of another spinoff coming, and it's coming from the comic book shop. So if you know anything about Big Bang Theory, one of their favorite places to hang out was the infamous comic book shop, and we do have, some people already cast to be a part of that series.
Yeah, we got Brian Posehn returning. We have Lauren Lapkus and Kevin Sussman will all reprise their roles from the Big Bang Theory. And it does look like it's, with those actors, it's revolving around the comic book store, but we'll see just exactly how much takes place in the comic book store, what happens out of it. But it didn't really think we'd be revisiting these characters. I mean, they were fun characters that had bit parts in the Big Bang Theory, but I never kind of expected we'd see a full series based on them. But maybe they could do something really fun, and this is the kind of the first one you could potentially have, other than, of course, we know we had Jim return for the finale, and he's done a lot of the voiceovers for Young Sheldon, but we could have physical appearances by the original cast if they wanted to, coming into the comic book shop.
Yeah, you got to figure at some point, a lot of those guys are going to make a one-off appearance or a cameo in the show. It kind of lends itself to, having those guys all make an appearance, which would be awesome, especially if you're fans of the show. The nostalgia hit every time somebody shows up, Raj coming in looking for something, or, Leonard showing up looking for something, or even, Penny showing up for whatever reason she would need to. But a lot of possibilities for, those characters to make those returns, and good on CBS for continuing to find ways to, cash in on a very popular, very wildly successful TV show that's one of the most decorated comedy series of all time.
Yeah, and they could put a conspiracy to rest, because after the Young Sheldon finale with, Jim Parsons' part and everything with Miam and all that, with the name of their kid and other things, there's this big theory that Leonard has died. And a lot of people are running with it. So this could be a way as well to have Leonard show up and make a joke about him not being dead, right, or something else, and just kind of poke fun at how people have gone off the deep end about, what it could mean for Leonard and the rest of them. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly if we do get cameos, if they try to keep it separate. But I mean, if you're doing something about the comic book shop, and we know how important comic books and everything else and how many scenes we had in there, you've got to have some sort, maybe even just one time, having cameos of the guys come in getting something.
Absolutely. And one of the things I would love to see is like them trying to do another costume contest and have all those guys show up in their costumes again. Just one collective, even if it's just like, hey, pop in for a second. Hey, we're here for the costume contest or something. Just, just a fun.
Have Sheldon be in the Flash again.
Yeah, he has to, and that would be a lot of fun. But it's going to be interesting to see. I love all three actors that are in this. They're all very funny comedians in their own right. So them getting their own show, good for them, and we'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, maybe he'll, the owner of the comic book shop, I forget the character's name, and I didn't look it up beforehand. Maybe we'll finally see him find love and find something good, because he's been kind of a dark character. He said some really dark things about his life and about the comic book shop and everything else of his hardships. So maybe we'll get a nice positive direction for his character going forward.
I hope so. I'd like to see him get a little bit of redemption, because you kind of want to root for people like that who, a little bit down on their luck, but just do it in a way that, is very funnily written. Mm-hmm. That was a very, like you said, at times very dark, but very humorous character as well. So I'm excited to see if they can carry their own show and see how long it lasts, because they've had a lot of success with their spinoff before, and we'll see how well George and Mindy does as well. So I'm excited to see this next iteration.
Yeah, and we'll see just how many more spinoffs we get if both of these are successful, because the potential to be, like, I didn't think Young Sheldon was going to be as popular as it was, but yeah, it had a very big, long run, and it was really well received, and we'll see if the spinoff is well received as well, and see what this one does. But, that's a world that just isn't stopping, even what they had. When did that end? Like 8, 9, 10 years ago now?
It's been a minute.
So yeah, it's still going strong after that long, after the main series ended.
Yeah, it's the staying power for that's been incredible. One of the most wildly popular syndicated shows as well, still, even that, it seems like I see like that airing all the time still in syndication. So good for them for continuing to, find new ways and new creative directions to go in that same world that, people have loved for going on 2 decades now. Like, it's been around for a while. Like, I think people forget just how long the original series was around before it even spun off to Young Sheldon. So it's had some long-term staying power for sure.
And if he hasn't been crowned yet, Henry Cavill's got to be crowned the king of the geeks and nerds and everything else, because from The Witcher to Warhammer to doing, board games to building his own PCs and being Superman and everything else, he has got a resume of just knowledge and geekiness to him. Of course, he's a big, good-looking guy. Well, now he's joining Voltron, so he's joining another series. Didn't exactly expect him to be a part of, but he's going to be a part of the live-action Voltron series, or Voltron film.
We're all living vicariously through Henry Cavill at this point. We all want to be him. Just this incredibly good-looking guy that gets to do all of our favorite nerd stories. He gets to feel like he gets to tell them all. Like, I know he's still pounding the table trying to get the Warhammer movie made, which I think eventually he's going to be a part of. And if anybody could get that off the ground, it's him. But this was a surprise one that they announced with Voltron. Voltron was a very wildly popular, cartoon in the 80s. It's kind of, a lot of people like to make unfair comparisons to Transformers for very obvious reasons. But this is going to be an interesting one to see who they all cast for it, because, Voltron's got a very, very dedicated fan base to it. And, it's held up in popularity for a very long time, but it's kind of always felt like it's been in the shadow of like a Transformers, just for very obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, good on Henry Cavill, man. Like, that guy gets to, he gets to do all these amazing things and play all these amazing characters. And here's another one that he's going to get to do that we're all excited for to line up and see when it comes out.
Yeah, because it kind of fits in between you got Transformers, you got Power Rangers, you've kind of got Gundam, and everything kind of fits in a little bit of all those aspects. And it's very, heavily with Japanese, like anime and everything else like that. So to have Henry Cavill be kind of the first cast member was really intriguing, but we'll see exactly how that works. Is he just going to be a voice of somebody? Is he going to be... We just don't really know. We don't have any casting past him. We don't know what his character is or exactly what he's going to be doing, but it's interesting to have him on board on something like that, because it potentially could be something really big, or it could be hopefully not a big flop for him, because he's had a few misses, even though we've enjoyed the movies like Ungentlemanly Warfare and a few others that he's done recently. We really enjoyed them, but they didn't have commercial success. He really needs something with one of these films. I think the last big commercial success film he was in, past Man of Steel and the DC stuff, was the Mission Impossible that he was in. Sure. So he's got, film-wise, he's been in a lot, but not a lot of them have been commercial successes. So hopefully this is one that'll be a good commercial success for him.
Yeah, for sure. And, let's not forget the one-off cameo he made in our favorite film of the year in Deadpool and Wolverine as well, which I know has led some people to try to throw around some wild speculation that he may be the next Wolverine in the MCU. Like, his variant may wind up taking over the mantle, which is crazy, but not out of the realm of possibility. But I have a feeling that was a fun, just one-off cameo for that. But good Lord, could you imagine if he's the next Wolverine in the MCU as well? Like, that would be crazy.
Well, there are rumors and letting from his meetings that he had to do Deadpool and Wolverine that he's actually already secretly signed on to be Captain Britain.
Which would be amazing.
Which would be an amazing role for him. Like, it would be fun to see him as Wolverine, but Captain Britain would be one that would be perfect fit for him, that you could bring in another kind of Captain America character and do a lot of interesting stuff with that. But we'll see if either of those rumors come true. He's going to be part of something in the MCU. Could use him for multiple different areas. So We'll see if he ends up being Wolverine, Captain Britain, or he ends up taking another role. Because I know a lot of people are talking about him maybe being Victor Von Doom, which ended up going to RDJ. But
still crazy.
Yeah, it's still crazy that we got that. But yeah, we'll see if where we see him pop up more. But he's got a ton of geek stuff in the pipeline, and just good for him. Like, I wish, I'm still up in the air on what I think about Witcher replacing him and doing, because I think it's going to season 4, so you got 2 seasons with him, 2 seasons without him. I'm just not sure of how that's just going to go, because we know all the drama behind the scenes. Like, he left because they weren't respecting the books and everything that it's based on, and they wouldn't really work with him. So it's like, all right, you're gone, we're moving on without you.
Yeah, and it kind of seems to be his fate with like a lot of these. Like, everybody seemed to universally love him as Clark Kent, Superman, Man of Steel, and he didn't really get to fully flesh that out from the character perspective as much as we all wanted it to. But yeah, I mean, he's still finding his way into all of these awesome projects that I'm super jealous that he gets to be a part of. So good on him for being cast in Voltron, because as soon as it said Voltron movie cast their first lead, I was like, watch it be Henry Cavill. And I clicked on the link, and the first picture that pops up is Henry Cavill. I'm like, of course it is, because it makes perfect sense, because he gets to do all of the awesome stuff, and I'm not jealous at all.
Yeah. And especially doing something like that, and potentially the next project after Voltron could be his Warhammer series. So he's just going to go from Voltron to wearing, potentially being in like a big mech, doing that, and then going into wearing the gigantic armors and doing big, huge battles in Warhammer. Like, he could be having a lot of fun in the next few films that he does.
Good for him, man. I'm excited for that. Excited for him. Looking forward to see who else gets cast in that movie as well as they move forward with that, and it's going to be a lot of fun to check out when it drops for sure.
Yeah.
Now I want to move into our film review of the week. So we got to go see Saturday Night, which tells the story of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, the wildly popular series that's been around forever now. It's been around for over 50. They're starting their 50th season, which is incredible. It's been around since the 70s. It's had an incredible run on late night. It's the king of improv sketch comedy shows. It's not really improv, but sketch comedy shows. And it's just had an incredible staying power. But this is about all of the crazy antics that went into night one of this show's airing.
Yeah, this movie was wild. It was 100 miles an hour from the get-go. There was no slowing down or stopping in this film. It basically picks up 90 minutes before the first episode, and they're having nothing but issues that they're not getting actors to sign on, and they're fighting with each other. They can't decide on what they want to do, so they've got 3 hours worth of sketches to do, and they got to try to fit that down into 90 minutes. And they've got lights crashing and just everything that potentially could go wrong is going wrong with it. And you have the network executives coming in, and like I said, this is a huge cast. There were so many characters and people and bouncing around back and forth of it, but you never felt like you were in that chaos with them, but you never felt lost in the chaos. Sure. And I really enjoyed the movie, and it was really funny. It had some really intriguing stuff. Everybody kind of played. I mean, they're stepping in some big shoes, because you have Belushi, you have Aykroyd, you have Chevy Chase, you have Gilda, you have a lot of big names, and I think they all handled it really well.
Yeah, the casting was really spot on for a lot of these. A lot of these people genuinely look like the people that they were playing. I really feel like the standout in the movie, in my opinion, was the guy that played Chevy Chase. Mm-hmm. If you've seen him before, if you're a fan of the show Gotham, he played Edward Nygma in that, one of the main antagonists, played the Riddler in the Gotham series, but he does an amazing job as Chevy Chase, which is one of the biggest stars to ever come out of SNL at that point. And he does a great job. The actor that plays Lorne Michaels, who kind of leads the film, and does an amazing job. And what's really incredible is a lot of these guys who aren't big name actors or, comedians or anything playing these characters, you have bigger names playing bit parts, and the cameos don't overshadow the main cast, with maybe the exception of J.K. Simmons playing Milton Berle. But
that was wild.
Which was amazing. So funny, so worth going to check out just for that. But they never really felt overshadowed by the really big name, cameos that we got in this of people playing, other famous people.
Yeah, I agree. The actor doing Chevy Chase, he was fantastic. He got his mannerisms down, his sarcasm and everything else. There's so many jokes that we're not going to repeat here, because a lot of the jokes are very dirty. It's very adult dealing with, because, behind the scenes in the 70s and how that was, that they were just basically doing whatever and saying whatever to each other in there. But it was a fun ride. I give it up to Jason Reitman for the direction on this, because it was just pure chaos from beginning to end, and being able to have all, you have multiple floors, and you have multiple parts of the stage, and you have so many different people, and it felt like you were behind the scenes. No one seemed out of place. It felt like you were in that chaos of that first show, and just everybody was gelling and working together well, and the jokes were really funny, and it had some really fun parts, and had some, other parts that were a little more dramatic but never got drama, but it got a slightly serious, and then they do something funny right after it, just to kind of go back after. But I really enjoyed the film overall. It was interesting to see all the skits that we knew and these actors and comedians that we knew and kind of everything they went through for this first episode was wild. Like, it was crazy that they even got this episode on the air.
Yeah, and that's kind of the tension that you get in the movie where, you know, they're having such issues with their run-throughs and their pre-show, you know, rehearsals that the executives are threatening to not let the show go to air to begin with because it doesn't look like they have their act together. Like, you get to see some really cool tidbits that if you're not in the know, you don't know. But originally, you know, Lorne Michaels was going to be the person that did Weekend Update. And now, obviously, we know notoriously went to Chevy Chase, who was just absolutely perfect for that at the time. And you see kind of how that plays out. And you see some of these iconic sketches that you mentioned that we've known from, you know, the early days of SNL. The actor that plays, you know, Belushi in this looks a lot like Belushi and, you know, has a lot of that manic, crazed comedic genius that he plays and just does a really good job of, you know, portraying that character as well. And one of my personal favorite bits that they do in the movie is them messing with the standards and practices lady that's from NBC, who's this, you know, super wholesome Christian conservative woman who's just really uptight and not understanding some of the jokes they're trying to say. And they're trying to present these very, very vulgar and dirty jokes in a way that don't seem vulgar and dirty, so she'll sign off on them so they can do them.
What is this?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just when people are showering you with attention.
Right. Yeah. Use your imagination. We're not going to go any further.
Yeah,
than
we're not
that,
going to go
but
further than that.
yeah, some very raunchy, dirty jokes, but it's done in a way that makes sense for the story, sense for the time. And, you know, the casting was amazing. Like you said, the cameos were awesome. There was a really great cameo by John Baptiste, who plays one of the, you know, first musical guests that they have on there. And just some really fun, you know, fun views into these people that if you followed the show for as long as it's been around, like, you see the early parts of this and some of their comedic genius, and it was a really good, like, put together movie that you said, yeah, it didn't waste any time jumping into it. Like, it didn't drag on in any particular area, but it felt like you were moving in real time as they were getting ready to air this show, because the movie's only about, what was it, an hour and 45 minutes? It was under 2 hours, like under 2 hour runtime. And you're picking up 90 minutes before the show airs. So it really felt like a real time, you know, moving through of getting the show to make the air. And it was a lot of fun. I had a good time with it. I wound up liking it more than I thought I would, because I was wondering, I'm like, is it going to be a little too serious? Is it going to miss the mark? I don't feel like it did in any way for me.
Yeah, I think it had a great balance and even gave me some 24 vibes, because they did pop up the clock every now and then and it would tick off a minute and then we'd go into 15, 20 minutes and then pop back up and we'd click off another minute. So it kind of gave me 24 vibes with that, but it worked just to show you that this is kind of going in real time, and just to see the chaos of a lot of the people who worked on the show and got that first episode. They were dragged in that night. Like, that was crazy too, that they're bouncing around to different areas like bars and other shows and stuff and dragging people over like, hey, we need this. What's it pay? Not much. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, we'll figure it out kind of thing. And there was this, like, recurring bit throughout the entire movie of this guy just laying individual bricks to build this authentic brick stage that felt like real New York. And literally him getting it done at, like, the last second before they go on air, which was crazy with, like, what it took to go into it. But yeah, so many fun little threads throughout the movie and stuff that, you know, really kind of help tie everything together. It's a lot of fun, a lot of humor. People that, you know, you may have a certain perspective on, that you get a little bit more of a look into how they act as real people, you know, that kind of thing. There's a fun running bit with Jim Henson in there that really made me laugh. But it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. The movie worked really well. It moved in a cohesive fashion, and I was really impressed with how they pulled it off.
Yeah, and I don't want to give it away, but there was an actor who played a dual role in this, and I did not notice until we got to the credits, because the credits were really fun throwback to Saturday Night Live as well, and sitting there watching and like, wait, they were both of these characters? I'm like, all right, you did great with both of them. Yeah. Like, you really handled them, kind of their mannerisms down, especially one is huge to get the mannerisms down because he was a very unique individual. Mm-hmm. But that was fun to see. But yeah, I think I don't think there was a single miscast in this. Everyone did it well. It had enough tension, kind of, you're like, how are they going to get this show done? How are they going to do this? And how Lorne Michaels didn't just go crazy of what he's trying to do here, because he's just bouncing around floors and having meetings and going and trying to find people. And it was just really amazing. Got to see kind of the arc for him, because especially, like, I really love the scene out at Rockefeller Center with the ice skating rink and everything that happened there, because there was some humor, but there's a little bit of heart and realizations and stuff that happened. But yeah, I think they did a really excellent job putting this together. You've got the chaos, you've got hilarity, you've got a bunch of cameos, you have everyone portraying these legends of comedy, and they all handled them really well. Like, those are some big shoes to try to fill in and pretend to be these people during their peaks. And they all did an excellent job.
Yeah, they really did. And that's not even to say, like, we know who wound up making the first episode of SNL if you've gone back and watching it. But even backstage with some of the people trying to get on the show even are really big names in comedy. Like, you have, I don't want to give any of the characters away, but, like, you have very notable comedic people that, you know, either wind up going to star on the show, or, you know, are very successful comics who maybe had a short stint on the show and moved on to be even bigger stars. But you have some pretty big names for, like, people backstage that were trying to get on the show that couldn't get on it either. And it's a lot of fun. I wound up really enjoying it more than I thought I would. Now, if I had to give, you know, Saturday Night a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give it about a 7.5. Like, I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's not a perfect film by any means, but for what it is, it's very successful in its own right, and a really funny movie that I probably would go back and watch again.
Yeah, I would probably give Saturday Night like an 8. I'm right there with you, around 7.5 and 8, because it was a really well directed. It looked good. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. And I'm just curious how it was filming that, because just so many people, like, you're talking hundreds of different people doing this film to try to recreate something that happened in real life. Like, that had to be a really big undertaking, and they handled it really well. Like, I think the humor hit well. Everybody did their parts well. Like, it was a ton of fun, and I, as you said, I enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting to enjoy it.
Absolutely, it's a fun take on such an iconic show, and even the people that were involved in the show have kind of come out and, like, heaped praise upon the show. I know one very big proponent of it was Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd did come out and say, you know, hey, they pretty much nailed it. Like, this was kind of the vibe around the show that was going on at the time when it was a lot of that chaos that was around in the show when it, you know, tried to go on the air for the first time, and he heaped a ton of praise on it. So that's coming from a guy who literally lived it and, you know, is putting his stamp of approval on it, which I think kind of goes a long way to, you know, it may not be, you know, some of it's going to be a little bit exaggerated for film, but to have somebody who lived through it to put their stamp of approval on it, I think speaks volumes for the quality of work that they did.
Yeah, like I said, all the cameos, even some voice cameos that we get to hear over the phone, which, of course, of deceased people, but some really good voice matching and stuff was done. Like, it was just really well put together film that it's kind of original and unique. Like, the whole thing takes place in 90 minutes backstage of a show right before it begins and everything, and it's done in such a different, unique way that I really enjoyed, and I thought that they did such an excellent job with, and I would recommend going out and seeing Saturday Night, and I would go back and see it again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to have a high rewatchability for me, just from, you know, the story that it tells, the humor behind it. Like, it's one that I could definitely see myself returning to for sure. So Saturday Night is out in theaters right now. We cannot recommend enough going and checking this one out. This is a fun date night movie, or if you're a fan of the show, go check this out. It's a wonderful story that they did a really incredible job with.
Yeah, so moving on, we wanted to do kind of a special talk about Halloween season. So it's getting to be middle of October. Halloween's coming up. This is a time of year where everyone's getting into their horror films or their specials and everything else that's Halloween related. So we want to kind of just talk about horror films, Halloween specials. What do we like to watch during the Halloween time? And, you know, if you want to kick that off with what's one of the big ones that you always want to turn into whenever it gets to October, what's the first one that comes to mind when you want to get in the Halloween spirit?
So I will say my favorite Halloween movie of all time is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Such a dark, gritty, kind of a take on a very real story, you know, based kind of loosely on a real serial killer. but that's such a dark, gritty movie that really helped, inspire a whole generation of horror films behind it. And it's such a good one to keep going back to. It's still creepy and disturbing to watch to this day. That kind of really gets me into that. It gets me into that holiday spirit for the spooky season, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's one that every year I make time and carve out time to watch.
Oh yeah, it definitely holds up for the tension and the horror aspects and everything this long, even where like when they've tried to do these reboots of stuff, it just still doesn't match up to what the original was able to do. And, that is pretty high on the list of, when you think of horror films, you're thinking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You also got Jason and Freddy and all those, but it's right up there with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to throw out, I more go kind of the campy side with horror and stuff. So probably one of my favorite series, and that I'll rewatch some of them or rewatch the first one, is the Scream series. I really enjoy kind of the campy kind of horror aspect. So because it doesn't take itself very seriously, and it's a lot of fun. And the first one, I'm still particular to that one just because it was kind of unique in a way to what came out. It's had some decent sequels, some that are bad, some of they're decent. I didn't think Scream 6 was that bad. They did a decent job with it, and we'll see what happens with Scream 7 and everything. But I've enjoyed kind of the campy horror when it comes to my watching around Halloween.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about Scream is the movie within the movie kind of thing, where the accompanying parody movie within the movie that's a parody of horror movies kind of is the Stab films, and they talk about how they incorporate, people incorporating stuff from the movie into the movie that follows along with the other. It's really, like you said, it's something that doesn't take itself super seriously, but Scream are absolutely ones that are on that list to watch around Halloween specifically. And in particular, what I love about the original Scream is that opening scene was so iconic when it came out, because it was rare that, okay, you have this big star in Drew Barrymore, and you're like, okay, Drew Barrymore's in this horror movie, let's go. And spoiler alert, it's been out for a couple decades now. She gets killed in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and you're like, what the heck am I watching? This is a big star getting offed in the first 5. You didn't really see that before.
Yeah,
and
that was a big surprise.
It was a big surprise leading into this movie that just, for that, I've been hooked on those films ever since. But yeah, that's a great one to add for Halloween. And those films are going to kind of stand the test of time of being that, iconic horror Halloween rotation for everybody. And that's a good one to include for sure.
I'll continue on with adding another one here because it fits in with the campy horror, and that's Shaun of the Dead. It's one that came out of nowhere. It's kind of spawned a trilogy of films that are loosely connected with doing different types of horror and stuff. But it had that zombie horror aspects, but it had a lot of humor to it. You got Red on You and all that, and you got Simon Pegg, and just brilliantly acted. Everything was well done. Had some surprises and stuff to it, but it did kind of surprise towards the end when it started getting a little more. They're trapped in the pub, and you've got all the zombies coming after them. They're starting to attack them and everything else. But it was such a fun film. And like I said, that's what I enjoy a lot with my movies. My wife isn't big into horror movies or scary movies or anything. And a lot of the stuff she won't watch me. So it's on my own viewing. So when I'm watching by myself with a lot of the stuff, I tend to go for these more campy horror films.
Yeah, and those are good to include in anybody's list. Shaun of the Dead is fantastic. I love that film as well. Simon Pegg is a genius when it comes to making those types of movies, and I can see why they've done really well. They're so rewatchable and so fun to keep kind of going back to. And you can take so many different directions with these types of movies, right? They like to put a humorous spin on it, which I think is needed because there's a lot of really serious different types of horror. Horror in itself is such an interesting subgenre because there's so many different types of horror films that you can make. Because you've got some of the, movies like Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity that are more guerrilla style, really loosely based on what could be interpreted as a real event, kind of making you question whether it really happened or not. Based on the brilliant marketing, Blair Witch Project did amazing job at marketing itself to really, people were questioning is this a real documentary type thing that we've put out? And it was so so brilliantly done. But then you have more traditional movies like Insidious. That's kind of one of the more popular modern horror franchises that have come out recently, and that are more the traditional spiritual demon type horror films. Obviously you can go back to classics like The Exorcist that is still spawning, sequels to this day. That, there's so many different types of horror movies that you can make. And, those are some of the ones that are always going to come to the forefront when people talk about their favorite Halloween movies.
Yeah, and The Exorcist is one that's often imitated but never replaced because not only the movie itself, but just the incredible story behind everything that went wrong with making that film and everything. And that definitely high on the list. Even throw back another classic with Psycho, like that's just one which I really enjoyed when we did the Universal Hollywood behind the scenes. They had the Bates Motel, and you got to see a lot of that stuff and got to see the house. But yeah, Psycho is another one on my list. That's just kind of that old classic that just kind of had unexpected. Like it was something that just has stood the test of time, even with what it is. Like, and you've had imitations abound on that, but nothing really touches the original.
Absolutely. And now you've got like this newer generation of like horror suspense films that are coming out and kind of continuing that type of genre for like a new generation of people. One I think of that was incredibly brilliantly made was Get Out. Get Out was is an amazing horror film that, Jordan Peele directed, that was kind of like takes what we thought we know about horror, kind of flips it on its head a little bit and tells it in a very interesting and, ingenious way that, Jordan Peele is a lot of people consider to be like the king of modern horror now with some of the stuff that he's come out with even. And you have movies like that. You have like A Quiet Place. I'm just going to kind of rattle off a couple of them. Like A Quiet Place that spawned a couple sequels that's of thriller horror elements to it and suspense that, are a lot of fun and are spawning off, their own series and things like that seem to have a lot of staying power. But it's really fun to see kind of the modern direction that horror is taking right now.
Yeah, and with bringing up A Quiet Place, which I really enjoyed all three of them, even though the prequel that they didn't bring a whole lot new. It was well acted and enjoyed it overall. But there's a game coming out this week for The Quiet Place, which they've mentioned that you can have a microphone on and active, and if it hears sound, the game detects sounds on your headphones. The creatures, the death angels, will react to you, which I thought is such a brilliant idea. Because I think there's another game out there that does that as well, but a horror franchise that's based around these blind creatures that can't do anything but hear everybody, and everyone has to be quiet to put in that aspect. Like, well, you have to be quiet in real life when you're playing the game, because if you scream or something else, they're going to come after you. So that's kind of seeing where horror is, because horror in video games is also pretty huge as well. So I'll find myself kind of going back to the Resident Evils and some of these other zombie or horror video games during this season as well, along with Silent Hill. They just released a remake of Silent Hill 2, I believe. So there's a lot of video games that I will revisit during this time because of just being the spooky, scary. It's just the season to be playing a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. And then there's a lot of modern games that are really taking off, like community wise, that have big events. I know some that have some recent staying power, like Dead by Daylight's a big one that a lot of people like to play. There's also like Outlast Trials and Phasmophobia and Demonologist. There's like a really bunch of really fun horror, a lot of co-op or individual type games that like can bring a lot of people and communities together to play that are a ton of fun too. And I kind of want to, like, before we wrap up Halloween, kind of pivot to like more family friendly stuff, because as much as there's like dark, serious, adult oriented like horror films, there's a lot of campy, fun Halloween stuff that like families can enjoy too. Like I love seeing, a show like Treehouse of Horror episodes for The Simpsons are typically the highest viewed ones that they do every year, that are always a big deal when they come out. But you've also got like some more fun, films geared towards younger kids, like the Hocus Pocus movies are always really popular this time of year. You've got Beetlejuice that we just did an episode about. Go check out our archives to see what we think.
Beetlejuice is going to be added to a lot of people's rotations for Halloween, because it's already dropped on digital. If you haven't checked it out yet on demand, you can grab it now to watch during the holiday season.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of stuff that's even like focused towards like families and stuff that the whole family can get together and enjoy. Obviously, Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown is another one.
It's not Halloween until I see Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin. It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and just sit there and watch it multiple times. That's a multiple time viewing, because even with Christmas time, with that, like when it hits the holidays, there's got to be Charlie Brown on the TV.
Absolutely, it's synonymous. But that's the fun part about like this time of season, is there are things that, this season in particular, and that's why Halloween is as popular of a holiday as it is, and a lot of people's favorite, to be honest with you. I know several people that this time of year is their absolute favorite time of year, and it's fun because you can cater that around so many, families, adults. Like, there's something in it for everybody that I think is a really wonderful time of year to get, your fix if you love these types of movies. And it's amazing. And it's so funny to me, the way they release these movies sometimes is a lot of them don't come out around the holiday season. Around this particular holiday, which is amazing for me because a lot of these films will come out in like January, February, and like the off season of movies. But the release dates for these always make me laugh because I know we've reviewed horror movies on this podcast that came out in January or February that, wound up making their way into an October rotation. And I'm wondering why more films, and I'd like to look into the business part of it, of why they don't come out around this time of year.
Yeah, there's one family film in particular that it's not Halloween until I watch it. I put this in the same vein as watching Die Hard to kick off my Christmas viewing as A Nightmare Before Christmas. Just the absolute brilliant stop motion animation. Just, it's timeless. It's classic. The story that Tim Burton did with that and the characters like Jack and Sally and everything else. Like it's one of those just timeless classics, like Hocus Pocus for those who grew up in the 90s, like we just got the sequel to that. Like this is one me and my family have to watch every single year. This and The Great Pumpkin is kind of what kicks off Halloween for us.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Nightmare Before Christmas because I just watched this with a group of friends last week, and it just brings back that flood of nostalgia with the incredible for the time even, and it's still aged pretty well, like the animation style and, the way the movie was presented and that iconic soundtrack of songs that, I find myself randomly around this time of year, like when Halloween roams around, singing This Is Halloween, and just loving that movie so much. And that's one of the more fun ones because you can watch it at Halloween or Christmas time and it kind of plays off for both.
And we normally do.
It's a pretty versatile movie, but yeah, that's one that's absolutely perfect for this time of year as well.
And I always find myself highlighting the line in one of the songs of a guy in Kentucky because of being from Kentucky. Like, it's like, hey, that's us. But yeah, I mean, who doesn't know the songs from that film? Like, they're so iconic. We'll listen to the soundtrack. We also do the Nightmare Revisited, where you have Marilyn Manson and you have a lot of others putting their spin on the songs, which some of them do better than others on it. But that's something that's also in our music rotation around this time of year. It's like, I don't think Halloween is huge for music other than you have a few classic, like One-Eyed Flying Purple People Eater song and some of those campy songs and Monster Mash, the camper songs, and then you have the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack.
Yeah, it's such an iconic soundtrack that was really stood up over the years. And you have some films in that same ilk like Coraline and Corpse Bride that, some people like to think are all loosely connected and telling the same story like repeatedly, which is a fun conversation to have with people. But yeah, absolutely another one of those family friendly. And that's what's so fun about, like I said, so fun about this holiday in particular is you have a little bit of something for everybody that, there's movies that kids can enjoy. There's movies geared towards adults that you don't always get with every single holiday. Like Christmas a lot of times tends to be more family friendly, and there's still some Christmas related horror movies and stuff which do tend to happen, and they always feel a little weird. Like for me, they always they're fun, but they're like, okay, you get your taste of it around those holidays. But this time of year in particular, you get stuff that are centered around similar themes but are presented in ways that you have stuff for adults and you have stuff for kids and stuff that families can watch together, and then adults have their own thing, and it's a ton of fun, and it's a fun time to visit because of all those different genres of films that there are. The ones that I feel are the most passionate about a specific genre are horror fans because there are like multiple conventions everywhere that are centered around it. We have a big one here called Horror Hound, which is a big horror themed festival. We have like 3 or 4 in this area of the country alone. It's a big spot for Halloween attractions around here, with some of the most highly rated horror attractions in the country are in our area. So it's a big deal around here for sure.
Yeah, and it's what you're into really, because horror is more expansive than you really think, because going from like my preference with a lot of stuff with the more campier side, but you have like ones that I can never really bring myself to watch, and it's not on my list of Saw films. Like I can't do the torture, gore films like that. Those in particular, I've seen others that can get pretty violent, but there was something about it. Because I think it was like Saw 3 or something I tried to turn on, and there was one guy who was in a chair and he had rings through his hands, and he had to pull his hands out to be able to stop. And nope. I can't do that. And I haven't watched a single Saw film since I turned that. Like, I've never seen them. I mean, just because it was on like cable or something, I'm just turning it on. I'm like, okay, I'll see what this is about. I've never watched any of them. Nope, that's why I haven't watched any of them. But like, I'd like to throw out one more that I have watched, and I know we've talked about this series on the podcast before because we're looking forward to the new movie that's going to be coming out next year. It's 28 Days Later. Sure. So that first one, because it was so unique, it was a different type of zombie. The zombies can move fast, and they're kind of a little more horrifying of just their screams and how they moved and just how it's filmed, you know, the lower budget look to it and stuff. That was a really good zombie horror film, as you know, they were getting big around that time again, because you know, started with the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and all those, and we had the Walking Dead series afterwards that became really popular. But this was a film series that really got people really big interested in it again at that time, because it was a more unique but familiar take on the zombie films and how they did all that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by so many fun like subgenres that you can go to in this one particular niche type of, you know, art of filmmaking. And you know, you have the zombies, and we never even touched on, you know, vampires or wolves or Frankenstein or some of the old school like monsters that are kind of having a little bit of a resurgence now. We're looking forward to Nosferatu that's coming out in December. That's going to be another fun one. That matches
you. Why is it not out in October? And it's out at Christmas.
Out in Christmas we're getting the Nosferatu movie, which is wild. But you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many different like avenues you can go to, monsters and, you know, paranormal and, you know, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, monsters. Like, there's so many different fun things that you can kind of hyper focus on, it. They're all done brilliantly in different ways. Like, I know monsters are kind of making a bit of a comeback now. Like, how much have we waxed poetic about how much we love Godzilla on here? Like, those are in some ways horror based type, you know, movies that you know, are very popular, and even like getting a resurgence in like theme park integration and things like that. That, you know, if you're big into theme parks like we are, you know, Universal in Florida is getting ready to unveil a huge expansion next year, and one of the parks that they're doing is dedicated specifically to old school monsters like Dracula and, you know, the wolf. You know, the wolves and, you know, Frankenstein and things like that are getting kind of this modern uptick, and that just speaks to the staying power of the genre and how popular it is, that it's getting even further integration by theme parks like that. One of the most wildly popular times of the year is right now for theme parks, with, you know, Disney and Universal having their Halloween Horror Nights and Halloween themed stuff. Kings Island with their Fright Fest up the road from us in Cincinnati doing their big Halloween stuff. And, you know, it's really cool to see how that can incorporate itself into so much of our daily lives and things that we already love that have special times of the year specifically for that are in a lot of places the most popular time of the year for them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the monster movies, because that's one that some of them are more scary than others, but like something that I'll turn on around this time too from now and then, because it's a movie I really enjoy, but it's got some elements to it. But Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. Sure. Like that is a classic kind of monster movie that was a remake, but it was done so well, and it's a lot of fun, and it's got a couple, it's not a horror film, but it's got a couple aspects that try to make you jump and everything else. But it's one that I'll watch around because of that monster aspect. We'll watch Godzilla and everything else because my oldest daughter's huge into Godzilla and Kong and stuff, so we'll watch those around this time. But yeah, you just have so many different options between the family friendly, between the horror, the monsters. Just there's so many different directions that you can go with horror that when you think of horror, you may not think it's that deep, but there is deep, because we didn't even touch on anything that's really the psychological thrillers. Like we had Long Legs this year and some other stuff that really go more into the fright is more the psychological aspect of it. Like there's so many different genres or different types of horror that you can go into, because like I said, we barely even touch on the slashers of Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers and stuff that have had 375,000 different films. But those are ones I go back to too, because even though they have the gore and everything else, it's just the classic slasher film, as I know a lot of people's go to around this time. But there are just so many options when it comes to Halloween time, depending if you like horror, if you don't like horror, if you just want to see Halloween episodes. You mentioned Treehouse of Horrors. I always go back to watch a few of those, especially the very first one, because it had the Raven in it, and that's one of my favorite Edgar Allan Poe. Sure. And I will quote the Raven while I'm watching that, and Homer and Bart as the Raven and stuff. Like, it's one of my favorite episodes, and that was the very first, that was the very first Treehouse of Horrors that featured that. And like, they have gotten wildly crazy with what they've done and gone a lot very adult with it, but they've also had stuff that's a little more kid friendly. But that is a staple for a lot of people who grew up in the 80s and 90s of, it's Halloween time, there's a Treehouse of Horrors.
Yeah, so much so that even now, still, I believe to this day, The Simpsons will kick off their new seasons in the fall with the Treehouse of Horror episode. Like, that's usually how they kick off their seasons now, and it just goes to speak to, the staying power and how wildly popular that is for them. And it's just, what more can we say about Halloween? There's so much that we could dive into that, that we don't have time for on this show, but that's just the staying power of the genre is... so many different ways you can go, and like, we can't touch on it all. There's just so much to dive into, and it's so fun because there's no like one surefire, formula for it. Now, you could speak to, the way a lot of stories are laid out are very similar, and, but there's so many different ways you can kind of bend that in ways that work. And it's such a fascinating genre of film and a wonderful time of the year to kind of revisit all of those. And you could talk to 100 different people and you would get 100 different answers on the types of films that they would like to watch around this time of year, because there's so many to choose from and so many different iconic ones that, obviously there are the classics that we mentioned that we didn't just dive into because we all know what they are. But I know a lot of people that have very specific other types of favorites that they like to watch every year. And it's a fun conversation to really have.
Yeah, it's like I said, when September ends and October 1st, it's Halloween season. So people are watching everything, watching the movies. But yeah, you could talk to 100 people and get vastly different results. Like, you may have a common ground of The Exorcist and Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the slashers and all that stuff. But you're going to have wildly different. 'Cause there's some might love the Toxic Avenger films that are, again, campy, or the Terrifier series that just came out with the third one. That's very, people have a very mix. You either love it or you actually loathe it because of just how deep into the gore and the action that it does. Like, you could get so many different answers, which is fun. And again, when it comes to those who don't like horror movies, you're going to get a vastly different, because it could be, because you get a lot of TV shows and stuff too. They will do a Halloween episode. So I know Martin did one that I still remember to this day because it was like a haunted episode with that, or you just have trick-or-treating episodes, and The Office had some really good gems, different costumes of being 3-hole punch Jim. But when you look at TV shows, like, they do a lot for Halloween and Christmas. Those are the two holidays they really go all in for, whether they do a spooky episode or a fun episode for that, and then you get different Christmas episodes. But yeah, Halloween and Christmas are kind of the two big, huge themed seasons that you find a lot to watch and a lot to go into. And it doesn't matter how many times you've watched it, you always want to return to it during that season.
Absolutely. And it just speaks to the fun of that genre, the fun of this time of year. That's why a lot of people get excited around this time of year, because you get one leading right into the other, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, there's so many, like, there are very, shout out to our friends, and we love horror, and that have dedicated podcasts to just this genre, and they go in and dive into different things like that. And, it's a whole subculture of itself in filmmaking. Like I said, it is easily, in my opinion, the most passionate fan base are fans of horror. And it's kind of fun that we, this time of year, we talk about some of our favorites, but I could go on for hours just on this genre alone. And it's just, it speaks to the power of the genre itself, that, you can really dive into and do studies on so many different things. It's just a fascinating subject to talk about.
Yeah, we'd love for you to come to our Discord, come to our video comments, or our social media posts that you see on this episode, and let us know your favorites. What do you like to dive into? Is there something that maybe we didn't talk about? Because we kind of kept it short. Like you said, we could talk for hours about the different ones, because we could break it down by genre. All right,
absolutely.
Here's our zombie films. Here's our werewolves. Here's our vampires. Here's our psychological. Here's our fan. Like, we could take a huge list just for horror. But let us know what your favorites are. What are the ones that you come back to every single year? What are the new ones that you've added to your rotation for your Halloween watching? Come let us know. We'd love to talk about that with you.
Absolutely. And, like I said, we welcome the conversation. I'm excited to see what everybody's watching this time of year for sure.
And speaking about Halloween and horror watches, coming up this week, we have Smile 2. So I haven't watched the first Smile movie. I've seen the trailer for Smile 2 about 1,000,000,000 times now. Sure. It's been in front of, I feel like, every movie that's rated R that we've watched this year. It's been there. That's out this week. But we also have On Demand. Alien Romulus is coming out on demand to watch. So that's another. We didn't even touch about one of the most legendary to most everybody horror films is a very first Alien. Like, it had so much tension, and like Alien Isolation, that game has got some great reviews of people feeling the horror aspects of that. We didn't even bring in Alien into any of this, but we have Alien Romulus, that you can go back into our archives and see how we felt about that. But at the same time, on completely different level, we have The Wild Robot. Both of those are going to be dropping on October 15th. So you can look at our archives for both of those, but we absolutely love The Wild Robot. We really enjoyed Alien Romulus. I'm really looking forward to revisiting Alien Romulus at home after I've had time to digest and look at, because we kind of looked at the shortfalls because it was kind of a greatest hits of all the Alien films. I want to go back and watch it again so I can take it in for exactly what it gave to us, because I think that's one on more viewings that I'm going to probably, I didn't dislike the movie, but it's one I think I'm going to enjoy more the more I see it.
Absolutely. It's definitely one that's going to make my way back to checking out again to see if I see how I feel about it now, knowing a little bit more about what went into going on and, you know, the backstory of the film and everything that it did. I'd love to see it with a fresh pair of eyes again to kind of revisit, but definitely one that's definitely worth checking out.
And it's a good time of year to revisit as
Perfect time.
And we also have Kate Winslet's Lee. This is a war film that I've heard some really great things about. You also have, I think it was Andy Samberg is in it, and doing a dramatic role that a lot of people didn't really see him doing, but he's gotten praise for it. I'm really looking forward to checking out because I don't ever remember seeing it air around here, so we didn't get a chance to check it out in theaters, but that'll be on demand on October 18th. And over on the streaming side, we have Brothers on Amazon Prime on October 17th, so that's another one I'm really looking forward to. You've got Peter Dinklage and Josh Brolin doing this kind of family comedy together. I'm curious just to see exactly how that I love both of them. I want to see how they play off of each other and how that film turns out. And then we also have Anna Kendrick. I believe this is her directorial debut for Woman of the Hour on Netflix on October 18th. And I'm leaning because I'm covering up my paper and I can't see what I was trying to talk about. But yeah, this is kind of based off of a true story about a serial killer who used the dating shows back then to get victims of women he killed and stuff. So that's a very interesting film to look at, and especially to be a directorial debut. That's a deep one to dive into.
Yeah, definitely taking on some serious subject matter for that one. But yeah, Anna Kendrick, incredibly popular actress, brilliant mind, great actor. Excited to see her directorial debut on something that's definitely going to be a little bit heavier subject matter. I'm excited to see what she does with it.
Yeah, over on the TV side, we have Shrinking Season 2 on Apple TV Plus on October 16th. So this is another one where, as we've talked about, Apple TV kind of fails with advertising because a lot of people, I don't think, know about a lot of these great shows. And Shrinking was one of my favorite new shows that came out because you got Jason Segel as just being himself. Like, he's a great comedic actor. But the biggest part of this series was Harrison Ford to me. Like, he gets to play his cranky old self, which is just great to see. Like, he is fantastic in the show. It's a great series. I'm really looking forward to watching season 2. But over on CBS, we have Ghost Season 4. That will be out on October 17th. And then one that I don't think a lot of people knew was happening because we've talked about The Office is getting a reboot here in America, that it's going to be taking place at a newspaper and everything else. But apparently Australia has done an Office reboot. That will be on Prime Video on October 18th. So I'm kind of interested to check it out. I've watched the British series. I love the American series. I really enjoyed the British series. But it's curious to see how the Australian one will do because, with every culture, they have different ways of doing jokes and how they handle jokes. And they've kind of also gender flips. So the Michael Scott character is a woman in this one. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they take on The Office.
Yeah, the trailer for it looked pretty interesting. I know when it dropped out, some people thought it might have been a parody, but it is actually really a real series that, was written and, shot in Australia. And it's going to be interesting to see, the reception behind that. Some of the jokes, I know a lot of people were kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to check it out. I'm excited to give this series a chance to check it out just because I love The Office as much as I do, same as you. Love the British version, love the American version. So we'll see how the Australian version holds up, but it's going to be on Amazon Prime Video as well, and just looking forward to at least giving it a shot and seeing if I like it or not.
Yeah, because a lot of people, if you look back at the American Office, the first season had some good episodes. It was very short, but it really didn't hit its stride into the second, third season and there. So, maybe they have a rougher first season, but we don't really know. But I am going to check out at least the first season and see how it does and see how that humor, because like you said, or like I said, with the British version, you may not get all the jokes if you're American because they have a different really type of humor, and Australia can be the same way. So it just really depends on how you respond to their type of humor, because they're going to change jokes and they're going to change things that fits their culture and fits how they live their lives. And some people just may be turned off from that aspect because they don't get the jokes or they don't get the relationships or anything else. But I'm really looking forward to checking out and see how they do with this version, because we'll have the Australian version of The Office, and then we'll have the new version of The Office in America with British actors in the lead roles. We'll see exactly how both of these play out and if they complement each other at all.
Yeah, definitely worth giving it a look, to at least give it a chance to see if we like it or not, for sure. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Please go to willbringthepopcorn.com for all our social media info. You get our latest episodes on there. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review on the audio room. It really helps raise the profile of the show. We definitely appreciate that. Coming up next week, we're going to have a little bit of a different episode. So if you've seen our social media posts, we've been given press access to the Cincy Comic Expo. So we can't thank Cincy Comic Expo enough for allowing us to come in, check out, the convention. We're excited to check it out, and we're going to do an episode covering our entire experience there. There's a lot of big name people that are going to be there, and we're excited to check it out and bring you kind of a different take and see what comes out of it. We're excited for that one.
Yeah, and we'll have some recap of panels. So we've got the X-Men animated series and X-Men 97. They're kind of revisiting both of those in there. We have some cast of The Mandalorian is going to be talking together. So there's going to be some interesting panels, and see what kind of news and information that we get out of those. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a different type of episode. It may not be out at the same time because we normally record on a Sunday, and this runs through 5 p.m. on Sunday. So, it might be a little bit late as we get everything together, because we got to put all the footage together and talk about it and see if we get any interviews. We're going to try to see if we can talk to a few guests there to get some interviews to talk about some interesting stuff, because we've got like Kevin Eastman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was our childhood. Absolutely. To be able to talk to him, and we'll just see who we can get in there. But it's going to be a fun special episode that we have coming up.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much to Cincy Comic Expo for allowing us to have press access to bring you a different, unique take, and we'll bring it to you next week as soon as we get everything ready and put together, and we're excited to bring that to you. But until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.